Welcome to today's information session. I am here to give you some information and ideas about how you can support your child as they prepare for their final exams in the diploma program. My name is Meris Shenstone, and I am the Diploma Program Coordinator at the International School of Busan. I have taught grade 12 students in schools in Australia and China and now in South Korea, and in that time have worked with many hundreds of students as they prepare for their final exams. It is a stressful time for them, and they need to ensure that they are making the best use of their time by studying efficiently and effectively. Our job is to give them the best opportunity to focus on exam preparation and to minimize the pressure and stress as much as possible. My aims for today's session are to help parents and guardians to understand more about what these exams are like, how their children can best prepare for them, and how we can support them during this time. Today's session will be divided into 5 sections. Firstly, what knowledge and skills your child will need to demonstrate in the exam. Secondly, how these exams may be different from those that are more familiar to many parents. Next, there will be some information about recent scientific studies on the most effective way to study. Then we will look at some of the issues that this cohort is encountering. And finally, what are some of the things that your children may need support with? So let's begin. What do your children need to know and be able to do in these exams? In English A, they write a response to an unseen text, analysing and evaluating the choices made by the writer. In psychology, they need to be able to explain psychology concepts clearly and succinctly in written essays. In chemistry, the questions will not be the same as the ones they have practiced with, so they need to apply their understanding in new situations. In mathematics, students often have to interpret and choose appropriate strategies in a range of real-world situations, often requiring them to use 2 or 3 areas of the syllabus. By way of contrast, here is a 2019 English test for Korean students. The answers are given through multiple choice options. Indeed, I recently had a Korean teacher of English shadowing me, and he said that the first time in his career that he had ever used anything apart from multiple choice questions in assessing his English student skills was when he started teaching IB 3 years ago. And here is part of an IB English exam. As the explanation states, students have to read 2 non-literary texts, choose one of them, and then write an essay-type response to a question about how the writer makes language choices in order to convey the ideas to an audience. They have 75 minutes in which to do this, and they are assessed on their knowledge and understanding, their skills in language analysis, their ability to organize their ideas in writing, and the quality of their writing skills. This is indeed quite different from multiple choice paper questions where there is only one correct answer. And this leads us to the next section of this presentation, how preparing for these exams may be different from those that are more familiar to parents. Many parents are used to a style of teaching which relies on direct instruction through lectures, where students sit quietly and take notes. This has been a common method of educating young people for centuries. But an IB education, and indeed education in many Western countries, has evolved over time. While there is still a place for lectures in the classroom, they now make up a much smaller proportion of teaching time. Instead, students are much more active in their learning, as you can see from the common teaching methods on this diagram. Students are actively involved in discussions, asking questions, debating, researching, and collaborating as their understanding of content grows and their skills develop. And this shift extends to the way in which the knowledge and skills that the students have is assessed. Again, while multiple choice questions have a place, there are many other forms of assessment in DP exams, including listening tests, writing essays, analysing, drawing graphs, and evaluating evidence. Jonathan Borden is an ex-principal of Seoul Foreign School, and he has compared some of the skills needed in traditional exams with those needed in IB exams. He states that examinations were primarily based on the mastery of facts rather than the demonstration of skills. These skills include communication, creativity, and independent thinking. He also believes that there was a focus on learning the answers through memorization, whereas for our students, while facts are important, understanding how and why is also emphasized, and thinking skills are highly valued. The foundation of developing skills, however, is very much still based on knowledge. Students need to know before they can understand and then apply their knowledge. So how do students study information and retrieve it successfully when needed in their exams? The work of Professor Daniel Willingham is relevant here. Willingham is currently Professor of Psychology at the University of Virginia. He earned his PhD from Harvard University. Willingham talks about how research from cognitive science has shown that the sort of skills teachers want pupils to demonstrate, such as the ability to analyse and to think critically, which we have seen are required in the DP exams, require extensive factual knowledge. In short, he believes that pupils need to know lots of facts and know them well. Thinking skills cannot be deployed effectively without factual knowledge. Willingham believes that memories are built after activities which require thinking and processing the material rather than simply memorizing it. Reading and highlighting make material familiar, but they do not lay the neural pathways that enable the material to be retained in the long term. Memories are formed when we process information and connect it with other information we already know, rather than learning information in isolation. To retrieve something committed to memory, a cue is needed. In order to retrieve information through memory, we need to make memories distinctive. A small example of this is when I ask students to draw the definition of a word or to create an example of it in Play-Doh. This means they have to process the information, and it gives them something distinctive to retrieve the information when it is needed. Recalling information needs to be spread over time so that the brain has to work to recall it. Every time it is recalled, the pathway is strengthened and it becomes easier to remember. We need to keep practicing even when we think the information is perfectly committed to memory in order to allow for some memory decay. Willingham believes that an individual's assessment of their knowledge is not a good gauge for whether they are really able to retain the information. The only way of knowing this is to test ourselves. An effective study program allows for a considerable number of practice tasks, and it is best if these tasks are in the same style as those that will be given in the exam. Here is a video from the University of Western Australia which gives a brief summary of some of this information.
Often when we study, the focus is on getting the theories, formulas, facts, and figures that we need to know for exams into our heads. I want to talk about doing the opposite. Instead of aiming to get information in, you try to fish it out or retrieve it from your memory without looking at your notes. The very act of successful retrieval is one of the quickest ways to form strong and long-lasting memories. We all know that retrieval is required during exams. However, many students report spending the majority of their study time rereading or highlighting their notes. When you passively review your notes in this way, they become more and more familiar, giving you the illusion that you know the material. But it is actually engaging what is thought to be a weaker memory system, that of recognition rather than retrieval. The reason many students avoid retrieval is that it's hard. When you put your notes away, you might find that you can't actually retrieve that much of what you've studied, and what you can remember is a real struggle to get a hold of. Don't despair. This is a good thing. It's a sign your brain is working hard. This is an example of what cognitive psychologists call a desirable difficulty. That struggle to retrieve is actually helping you to form a strong neural pathway. You know that feeling at a quiz night when a question comes up that you're sure you know the answer to and you're struggling, then suddenly it pops into your mind. That struggle and successful retrieval is the feeling you should aim for in your study. The first time you call something to mind, it's a bit like walking through a field of grass. It lays down a very faint set of footprints. If you never walked that way again, it would fade away. However, each time you walk that same path again, you will ever so slightly reconstruct and consolidate the knowledge, so that once you've retrieved it multiple times, it becomes a solid, well-worn neural pathway. There are a few good ways to practice retrieval. The first is by using flashcards. You can go old school and handwrite them, or use an app. Anki is one of the best ones. You can also do practice exams and quizzes, generate your own questions, or ask a friend to test you. Another simple way is just to take a blank page of paper and start writing down what you can remember, perhaps in the form of a mind map, model, or timeline. When you first try to retrieve new information, you're not likely to remember much. That's normal. Start small and build up. Even if you successfully retrieve just a couple of the things you were trying to learn, that's great. Go back to your notes and then try again later. Importantly, leave enough time between retrieval attempts that it feels a bit tricky. Remember, we're aiming for that struggle, but not so long that you can't retrieve anything at all. And it's vital that you retrieve the same information multiple times to create that strong pathway. Do keep checking you've got the answers right. You don't want to cement the wrong information in long-term memory.
Now that we've covered how students should be studying and how it may be different from what we are familiar with, let's move on to this specific group of students, our current grade 12s. They're exhibiting many of the usual stresses and strains of students at the end of high school, but this year there is also the added complication of studying while in a pandemic. Let's look at some of the issues I have noticed in my conversations with them. They've had trouble sustaining concentration at times. They're often tired. Sometimes their study habits are not well developed and they're reluctant to accept different ways of studying. An organised study program is needed by a number of our students. Here is a simple video from ASAP Science with its 10 million subscribers, which gives some good advice on helping students feel more in control of their study routine.
Time for school, and it's no surprise that many of us are determined to study smarter instead of longer. But which study tips and tricks actually work scientifically and can help you get those perfect grades? First up, research shows that study sessions are most effective in small, short chunks. Instead of cramming in a 10-hour study session, it's much more effective to spread it out into 20, 30-minute sessions over a few weeks. This is because your brain is better at encoding information into the synapses in short, repeated sessions as opposed to one large one. And this is why even learning different skills, whether it's swimming, tennis, or a singing lesson, often follows this same format. And while cramming and pulling all-nighters may be a ritual, it turns out that this is linked to the lowest grades. After prolonged nocturnal study sessions, reasoning and memory may be negatively affected for up to 4 whole days. Instead, setting up specific times in a day or during the week just to study primes your brain by creating a routine, and over time, studying actually becomes easier as your brain is trained to learn in those moments. And while many of us spend hours passively rereading our notes or highlighting a textbook, studies have shown this to be ineffective. It doesn't improve your understanding of topics, nor does it link key concepts together. It can even be detrimental as it draws your attention to less important information. Flashcards, on the other hand, are proven to be excellent memory reinforcement tools, whether during your skill scheduled study times or during off times like a bus ride home. It also helps to have a specific goal for each study session. Instead of aimlessly studying, pick one aspect you'll focus on, whether it's balancing chemical equations or learning how to conjugate French verbs. If you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it well enough. In studies where individuals were asked to learn a passage and then half were told that they would be tested on the material while the other half were told they would have to teach it to other students, participants expecting to teach it did much better at understanding the main points. When you're expecting to teach, your brain organizes the information in a more logical, coherent structure. Of course, practice, practice, practice. Not only do practice tests put your brain in the environment, but even if you make mistakes, they help identify gaps in your knowledge. Practice tests have also been shown to increase confidence, thereby leading to better performance. So, where should you be studying? Research shows that having a designated sacred spot for study that's well equipped with every tool you might need is best. Just like setting times, this primes your brain for studying. Have an awesome study playlist? Not so fast. While some studies have shown that certain types of classical music can help improve concentration, a recent study has shown that learning with rhythmic background noise can be detrimental to focus, and those not using music fared much better. And if you haven't already, put away your phone. This is a no-brainer, but your texts and social media notifications severely decrease concentration. Of course, exams can be extremely stressful, so if you want some tips on how to deal with exam anxiety, check out our ASAP Thought video, which breaks down some tips for that. Time for school.
So how can we help? We know what type of exams students are facing, and we have an idea of the most efficient way for them to study. What else can we do? We can keep an eye on their physical and emotional well-being. There is a stereotype of children staying up all night before the exams, existing on energy drinks and little else. At a time when the students are at the end of 2 challenging, tiring years of work, this is no state for them to be in before their final exams. There are factors, however, that work together to create the ideal environment for students who are studying hard. So let's first look at the physical support that we can help give them. Students need to eat well and they need to eat regularly. They need to take breaks from their study. They can determine this before they begin. It could be half an hour with a 5-minute break or an hour with a 10-minute break, but they need to have a break to look forward to. A timer on their watch or phone will help with this. They should be working at a desk, not in a bed or on a couch. A study routine helps them understand and to recognize what the shape that their day will take and to be able to make plans. They need to have sufficient sleep. There are many studies which say that adolescents, although they go to bed later, they need more sleep. They need 9 hours at night. And finally, they still need to exercise, and this will help with their sleep as well and their stress levels. Just as important as physical needs are the emotional needs that these students have. Here are 3 that I hear about from the students. Number 1, avoid comparisons with others. Number 2, show confidence in their ability to succeed. And number 3, recognize the stress that they're under. It often explains the behavior that they're exhibiting. So now we come to the end of today's presentation. Please feel free to contact me about anything I have discussed. There is a lot of information readily available about all of the ideas I have presented, but I will leave you with a list of some of the sources I have used. Thank you for listening.